Jeremy.
All right, can you see it now?
Cannot.
Well, daggone. Hang on here, we'll get it figured out. Back to share screen.
Looks like there it is.
Can you see us now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Daggone, I was about to panic. Well, it's certainly a good time to start talking about forage sampling. The grass is leaving here a mouthful at a time. Seems like winter time's getting closer every day to us, especially in the forage world. And thinking about forage sampling, why do we do it? Phil said a while ago about getting a good idea of what we got, and it's kind of like taking a soil sample. Unless you take one, it's just a wild guess as to what you've got. And supplementing without one, it's like putting fertilizer out without a soil sample. It's a good tool, certainly, to help develop supplemental feeding strategies and to know whether our forages are good enough to meet the animal's requirement through the winter. Now, all of us know how to make good hay. Everybody's in the hay knows how to make it. It needs to be made early and looked after. But now it's hard to do. There's only so much hay that you can make early. It's only physically possible to run the equipment over so many acres in a timely manner. And certainly here in the mountains, the weather is not the friendliest for us. A lot of times, the hay's ready, but the weather's not. It's still damp and wet, and you just can't get on the hillsides and work and do anything with the hay. Forage samples are good to help identify any kind of nutritional gaps that may need supplementation. And when we think about the feed cost of the animal, whether it's a beef cow or whether it's a sheep or whatever animal we're feeding hay, the winter feed cost is one of the biggest expenses. And if we can do that using our forages more efficiently and figuring out where to feed them at what stage of production, that certainly has potential to save us some money. Now, thinking about forage quality, there's myths about forage production, things that you've heard all your life about forages. One of them being, if it's green, the quality should be good. And green is certainly a positive thing, but now sometimes green can be a misleading factor, especially when we look at the quality of late first cutting hay. Phil Blevins and I done a test 4 or 5 years ago, and we harvested hay all summer long, made a first cutting of hay from about the middle of May till about the 1st of September. And that really late hay looked really good because you had a lot of green color, but when you separated that mass, there's still a whole lot in there that was first cutting, and it was really, really ripe and tested really, really ready, as opposed to that little bit of green that we had that made it look pretty good overall. And that kind of answers the second statement. The first cutting hay made late is still pretty good because you get all that regrowth. But the quality seems to decrease all season long, even though you've got that little bit of green in there. So keep those thoughts in mind. When we look at a forage sample, you get a lot of different numbers. You can get a whole lot of numbers depending on how much you want to pay. You've got just what you need here tonight to rank your hay, to know exactly what you've got. And I guess the best way for us to focus on this, we're going to look at 4 different things tonight. Basically, we're going to look at dry matter, adjusted protein, neutral detergent fiber, and total digestible nutrient. Okay, these are the 4 that we've got. Now we're going to start out with dry matter. It's the very first thing you see under your name, first thing that they calculate. And you see the moisture content, 15.2% on this sample, and your dry matter 84.8. No matter how dry you think it is, there's always some moisture. It's impossible to get 100% of the moisture out, whether it's in hay or in grain or anything else. Always some moisture there, and it has to be accounted for. Dry matter being the dry feed minus the water. And the moisture level is important, in the hay production world. It can cause the hay to heat. And when hay heats, it causes quality losses. And, if it heats enough and you've got it ricked up or stuck in the barn, there's certainly a chance for a hay fire. We had a couple of those, at least one I know of in Washington County this year. Now, when we look at moisture level, round bales over 18% and square bales over 20% moisture are at a risk to heat. And when you heat, you get nutrient loss. And like I said, sometimes a fire. I know in old times, we baled up square hay and people would, if they thought it was a little heavy, they'd go in there and take salt and scatter over top of it and salt that stuff down, try to get they thought that would help take care of some of that excess moisture. Whether it did, whether it didn't, they made everybody feel good. It's easier to get it baled up at the right moisture. Now, we use dry matter to calculate in rations. It's certainly the easiest way to compare all feeds kind of equally when you take that water out. Crude protein. We get in here and get to thinking about protein. Of all the forage components or nutrients, we worry more about protein than we do any of the others, sometimes unwarranted. There's lots of ways to supplement protein. You can buy tubs, you can buy blocks, you can feed liquid. There's all kinds of ways to supplement protein. And we know it is important. It's important for growth, for milk production, for muscle development, all these things that make animals grow. And when they calculate crude protein, it's the total nitrogen of the forage sample multiplied by a correction factor of 6 1/4. That's the way that they calculate crude protein. Now, when you look at the forage sample, there's crude protein and adjusted protein. And in ration development, I'd encourage you to use the adjusted protein. It takes into consideration whether there's been any heat damage to the forage, what part of that protein is unavailable to the animal that can't be used. Some of it's available, some of it's unavailable. This gives us our best estimate on what protein is animal available. And as we look at diet guidelines for the cow, lactating cow in that first 60 days is about 11%. Her first 2 months after calving, and then she starts to decrease. It starts going down 9%, 7% when she kind of dries off and you wean the calf. And then in that last 60 days before she calves, the protein turns and goes back up again. But those are your diet guidelines, which are very useful. When you get a forage sample, you can kind of look at that protein and see what you got, and if you think it's going to meet her stage of requirement. All right, now if we look at our sample, here's our crude protein. This one is 8.3%. The very next one, the one that we would use in any kind of ration development, would be 7.6% dry matter. So as we think about this one, is there something going on? Our protein's a little bit lower. Is it a stage of maturity, or is it a stage of heat damage? And we looked at this one at 15.2%. We think, well, it shouldn't be heat damage because it looks pretty dry. It was baled right. So we're going to guess that this one's probably more than likely stage of maturity at this point, looking at the sample. Now, when we look at the quality standards of grasses for crude protein, you can break those things out into 4 levels. Excellent being 12% or above. And at 12% or above, you've probably got some really early made grass, or it's got some kind of legume in it to help get to 12%. Good hay, 10 to 11%. In the fair range between 8 and 9. And when you get down in below 8, now it's not the best of quality. We're kind of in the poor quality range there below 8. If that's all old cows got now, it's going to be a sad winter without somebody carrying a bucket every day to visit her. Our next one that we're going to look at is total digestible nutrient. And like I said, or protein is the one that everybody worries about and probably needs supplementing the least. This is the one that needs supplementing the most and it's worried about the least. It's kind of the exact opposite to the way it really needs to be. This is the energy content of the forage, taken in all aspects. They look at digestible carbohydrates, digestible protein, and digestible fat, and they multiply the fat by a factor, I think, of 2.25, because of the density of the fat. There's more calories in that portion of the fat. And like everything else, the higher the number, the more energy dense this forage is going to be considered. And as we've said before, energy is most likely to be the deficient factor in a lot of rations. It takes energy, to run the storehouse, run the company, make that calf mash the scales, and that's sometimes the one that causes the most trouble. Now, when we think about hay quality, high quality grass hay, I think, is equal or greater than about 58% energy. In that medium range, 52 to 57, and in the lower quality, probably 51 or below. And when we think about the cow's energy requirements, naturally lactating right after she's calved, it's the highest, right around 60%. And after that second month, that's kind of her peak, and then her energy level starts to decrease, and it kind of tracks all the way back down to where she goes dry again at around 48% energy. So that'll help you kind of put those together based on hay quality and cow production requirements, where she's at in her production cycle. Now, the next one, here it is. You can see it. I have to move everybody around. I've got my attendance list over here on the corner, but you can see right over where my slide says, but there's TDN right under the energy calculation, total digestible nutrient. They give it as a percent of dry matter. So this hay is in the 50s, 53. And if we go back up, that's in the medium kind of quality of hay. So not bad as far as the quality. A lot of hay like this in Southwest Virginia that's fed and keeps a lot of animals alive. But that's where we find the energy calculation. Our next one that we're going to look at tonight is neutral detergent fiber. And this one probably should have been the one we start with, because this tells you more about the maturity level of the hay right up front. It represents the total fiber of the forage in the sample, and it tells us the total cell walls. And this includes hemicellulose, cellulose, and lignin. The lignin is pretty much indigestible. That's what makes plants stand up if they're upright, and it's not very digestible. But it takes all this into consideration. We can use NDF to help predict forage intake by the animal. How much can she hold? There's a point, that the cow's full and she won't hold anymore. And this is the figure that we use to kind of help figure this out. Now, as the forage matures, the NDF increases, and as that NDF goes up, her intake's going to decrease. And we see a range of NDF of anywhere from about 50 to 80%. So it's a big swing. I'm going to give you, I call it the magic number for NDF tonight, of 65. If the hay's less than an NDF of 65, it's pretty good hay. And I don't expect a whole lot of decrease in intake. But when we get up to a level higher than 65, you can expect intake to be affected just because of the fibrous content of the forage. You fill the rumen, and it takes the microbes a while to break all that down and for it to pass. It just slows the rate of passage. These older cows that are eating hay that's really, really high NDF, they've got free choice hay, and sometimes them old cows will get down. And if you have one necropsied, and you look in the room, and it'll be just slam full of hay, not another bite can go in, but the old cow, she's got down and maybe even died. Or if you're necropsying her, she's died. But that's why it's the fiber level. You just can't get another bite in her until she poops to make room for the next bite. If we look, here's the fiber level where you'd find it on the forage sample. Right here, the second one, NDF, if we look as a percent of dry matter, this is 73.4. So this is greater than our 65 magic number threshold. So we could expect some decrease in intake. This also helps explain why the protein of this hay is at 7.6%, because it's relatively mature. Okay. I'd say we're pretty lucky to have an energy content as high as it is, given the NDF content of the forage. All right. Some other things we could look at on forage samples that I'll just make you aware of, or things that you might want to think about testing in the future. You can look for key minerals, calcium and phosphorus being two very important ones. And you can see the dry and lactating cow requirement for calcium and phosphorus, with lactating being significantly higher than the dry cow requirement. But in most instances, we want to keep that at a ratio of about 2 to 1, calcium to phosphorus. If we get that out of whack and we feed very long in that situation, we can develop some urinary tract problems that are certainly not beneficial to the animal. So most things that we're going to feed beef cows with a mineral, 2 to 1 mineral, will be fine. Other things that you can test for, nitrate nitrogen being one of these things. Sometimes plants under stress can accumulate nitrate, and summer species are particularly bad for this. Summer annuals, sorghum Sudan, Sudex, even Johnson grass can sometimes accumulate nitrate. And it's more prevalent under drought or when you're using really high levels of nitrogen fertility. So if you're growing summer species in drought, and you've really put the fertilizer to it, it may be something to think about. You might want to test for. Check with Phil. I'm sure he'd help you. And our friends over in North Carolina, I know they'll do the same through Cooperative Extension. Another good one to look for is pH, if you're testing corn silage samples, or baleage. You know, this is a good indicator of fermentation. And if pH range is out of range, you may want to start looking for molds and other things that might cause you some trouble. Last extra one we'll look at tonight is organic matter, or ash content. Now the ash content, if you get the ash up in the 6 to 8, I'm going to say more closer even to 10, it indicates that there's a problem with soil contamination in the hay. You may be running the rake just a little bit too low, and it's digging in the ground, and you're getting some extra dirt in the sample. And that can cause problems, especially if you're doing baleage. Sometimes soil contamination is a contributor to botulism, which you know is certainly toxic. You feed one time, the next day you go out and cows are laying around everywhere. If it's been baleage, you can imagine botulism coming from soil contamination, or a dead possum in it that you missed as you were baling up, that could have caused that. All right, let's look at this forage sample. This is a Wise County sample, one of the ones that Phil shared with me. First place we would go to would be our dry matter. And now this one was dry, 12.2%, well below the threshold for any kind of heating. You know, sometimes you can bale hay too dry. I wouldn't expect it with this one, but it is certainly should have kept well. As we move on down, we're going to look at our fiber level, and we go to neutral detergent fiber, NDF, and it is 60% of the total dry matter, which is well below our threshold magic number is 65. And so this should be really digestible, should be really good hay. When we look at that protein, there it is at 11.2, and that's in the higher end of our protein scale for grass hay. So it's really good. Our TDN in this one's 60. So 58 was our excellent, bottom of the excellent. So man, this is a really good hay. Hey, somebody done a really good job getting this one up. As I thought about applications to use this particular hay, things that stood out to me would be like backgrounding calves. If you're going to get calves ready, let's say for the VQA sale, and you're going to feed them 60 days, man, this would be some super hay to get that done. That's turning hay into cash about as fast as you possibly can. Cows that have just calved, this would be a super choice for them. And if you need some extra money, somebody that has a horse that really loves their horse, you know, I think you could name your price. This would be a really good hay sample. All right. As we move on down to the next one, let's check this one out. This sample, 81.4% dry matter. So we're a little bit above 18. There's a possibility, you know, it might heat just a little bit. It shouldn't be bad. Certainly worth noting. We need to pay attention on that one for sure. If we come on down to adjusted protein, this one is 8.4. So it's in that lower part of the pretty good hay at 8.4. Our fiber content kind of tells the tale. This is the number that I always look at. This is what predicts the intake, 71.2 right here. So we know this hay was getting on the mature side. It was put up pretty good shape. The energy, 53.7. So medium quality energy. We see a lot of this kind of energy in Southwest Virginia hay, getting a little bit on the later side. So when we think about this one, how would we use this kind of hay? Well, what stood out to me, this would be a good one for dry cows right after you wean calves. They could cruise along on this really good. Pregnant cows right before they calved, you'd probably have to feed them maybe a couple of pounds of feed a day to keep them clucking along, that we wasn't losing any body condition. This one would work for cows that have calved. We just have to be a little more vigilant and up that feed probably 5, 6, 7 pounds per day. So it's got a lot of uses. Our best choices would be these two right here. But it would work in a lot of different situations. Now, as we look right here, this 71.2, the NDF is going to affect our intake without a doubt. We can feed this one free choice, but she can't eat enough right after calving to meet her nutritional needs. She just won't hold it. We get into that scenario where her rumen's completely full and it's processing and the bugs are working hard as they can, but she's making milk and it's taking more energy than she's taking in. And then we have to start breaking down fat and we start losing body condition. So it makes it tough. So we think about a 1,200 pound cow. She should eat about 26.5 pounds of dry matter. And this is about 2.2% of her body weight. Now in real feed, that would be about 32 pounds. But now remember, we're converting everything to the dry basis, taking the water out. Now, because the fiber's high in this particular sample, she's only going to be able to hold about 20 pounds of dry matter. So that's going to be about close to 25 pounds of actual hay that we would carry out. And the way we calculate this, we take 120 divided by the NDF of the hay. And that tells us that she's only going to eat 1.69% of her body weight. That's all she can hold. She may want to eat more, but she's going to eat till she gets full, and that's what's going to make her full. Then when we multiply that, 1,200 pound cow eating that percent of her body weight, then that means she's only going to eat 20 pounds of that feed. All right. Now, this is where we get in trouble, I think, in the wintertime in the cow business. If you look at that manure of that hay, you're likely going to see some undigested pieces of forage in it. Little woody-like pieces of grass that have went through that hadn't been completely broken down. That's a problem. We're going to go backwards on our body condition. Now, if we calculate this mathematically, we're not going to get into calculating energy and protein for all the different stages, but she's going to be short on this. Remember, we needed for a cow that had calved 59% energy, and this one was 53, and we needed 11% protein. This one's about 8. So eating wide open, she can't get what she needs. So we'd probably have to supplement her with 6 or 7 pounds of feed to keep her in good body condition. So when breeding time come, she'd be ready to breed. Now, when we think about what should we feed her, I'm thinking a commodity feed like corn gluten or soy hulls. And both of these are high fiber feeds. And I know you're thinking, well, why would you feed another high fiber feed? Because she's already full of fiber. Well, this fiber is a highly digestible fiber that breaks down really, really rapidly in the room, and it helps dilute some of the other heavy fiber things that are there. And it's compatible with the rumen fiber microbe population. So I think this would be a really good choice for us in this scenario with this particular hay. Now, another strategy, if you fed this hay early, would be to keep maybe hold your second cutting hay a little bit later and move them over to that later in the season to help make up some of that difference. And after a while, when grass starts, cows get wanting grass about the end of February, and they want to quit eating that old high fiber hay and they want something green. You can keep them eating on this, and that keeps them kind of cruising along.
Hey, Scott.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. I thought you might want to address this question before you moved on, but somebody asked, he said, is that 120 you divide the NDF into, is that a constant or does that change with the weight of the cow?
I think that's constant. I'm going to have to double check that one for you. But from what I've read, that is constant. There's another way that you can calculate it. You can multiply, let me think about the weight of the cow times 1.2%. So I think it's a constant. It works inversely. I've calculated it both ways, and then divide what you get by the NDF of the forage, and that'll give you the intake. So I think that will work as a constant. Our friends, I had a publication here that I had studied over the last 2 or 3 days. I'll give you the list of those publications just in a minute, but it was listed in one of those as a constant, the best I could tell. Anything else?
I think that's all the questions in the chat right now.
Okay. I didn't see the chat. I've missed it some way.
Well, I think when you're presenting, you're not able to see it, so that's why I wanted to catch you.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just cruising right along and I didn't have a clue. All right. Now, forage sampling, this is a good place to start in ration development, and we can get a good inventory of what we've got and figure out a strategy to feed it. And we can do the math, and we can do all these things correctly to the best of our ability. But got to monitor that cow and her body condition score as you go along. Environment, mud, rain, snow, all those things take a toll on the cow. Changes in forage quality, even when you go from one field to the next, there's differences in that, even if you've tested and they're very similar, but they may feed different. And I used to work with a lady here. She was my 4-H agent, and her father run the livestock market. Used to be in Abingdon, Nina Eastep, and her father was Little Doc Gilmer. And she said that he always said that the eye of the master fattens these cattle. And I got to searching for that. I thought, well, that's a pretty good saying. And that was in the title page of the Feeds and Feeding book that Dr. Ensminger put together. And it's been out forever and ever. And that was printed in the Rural Pacific Press in California in 1919, which I thought was kind of neat. But the eye of the master fattens these cattle, and that's what it takes. It's taking a continuous assessment of these animals and how they're responding to the way we're feeding. We can use science to the best of our ability, and this will sure help us get us a lot closer, but it takes that little bit extra too, keeping a good eye on them to know what they got. Now, I got you some good resources online. I've studied these this week along with what I kind of remembered from times past. Here are 4 really good ones: Interpreting Forage and Feed Analysis from Mississippi State. That's I think that's Jerry Clower's alma mater. Interpreting a Forage Analysis for Beef Cattle from Alabama. One from Wisconsin, and Feed Testing and Forage Analysis for Beef Cattle from the Beef Cattle Research Center. do we have any more questions tonight? I hope this has given you kind of a brief overview of the four main components that you would look at: dry matter, adjusted protein, TDN, and the neutral detergent fiber, with that fiber being one of the major components addressing animal intake. Remembering that 65 is kind of the magic number, and less than 65 is you're getting really good, and greater than 65, then we got to be aware that we might not be able to get enough of that hay in them to meet their needs, especially in a calving situation. You know, in that dry cow pre-calving situation, it still might get by, but we got to keep an eye on it, especially when we get into those higher stages of production. Phil, do you see any more questions?
I know there's one coming. I don't know if she's got it typed in yet, but it's in regards to a ration. Let's see. Well, I can read this one here. She said, looking for a total mixed ration with corn, sweet feed, alfalfa pellets, and sunflower seeds, and that's for sheep. And that the hay was the second. Well, I guess that last forage test that you had put up there.
Okay. I need to let me read this one more time now. How to do a total mixed ration with corn, sweet feed, alfalfa, sunflower seeds. We can work on that. I'll have to take some notes now, and let me jot these down, what components that we've got. With that good of hay, heck on, that's going to put you way ahead in the game when you go in here to balance this thing. Corn, sweet feed, alfalfa pellets, and sunflower seeds. Let me work on that a little bit, and I'll catch back up with Phil and talk it over with him, and we'll get you something on that one. We'll do our best.
If anybody else has a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can send it in the chat box here. And I'll let you know too that if it's okay with Scott, I'm going to post this. I have recorded it. I'm going to post it on our office YouTube channel. So if you test hay next summer and you want to know what it means, you can always just go back to that and walk you through those four components again. Okay, any other questions? All right, Scott, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think you've answered them all. I appreciate that. I appreciate the excellent information, and thank you for speaking with our group tonight.
Hey, you're welcome. I've enjoyed visiting with you, and it's certainly helped me to go back and brush up a little bit on the forage sampling too. It's a good time of year to do it. The grass will be gone soon, and hay time will be here.
Right. All right. Jeremy, you have anything? I know next Tuesday, we have Sharon Rice, who's a Virginia Cooperative Extension agent. She's going to talk about Mediterranean eating. And then Jeremy, what's coming up on Thursday?
We've got a specialist with Kentucky State University that's going to be covering pawpaw production. And, you know, there's totally difference in pawpaw trees that you produce versus pawpaw trees that are in the wild. So Kentucky State actually has one of the largest pawpaw production, educational wise, pawpaw production facilities in the United States. So they do a fabulous job there in Frankfurt, and so she's going to be joining us next Thursday. Should be a good one.
All right, thank you.
Great job tonight, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
You got a comment and a question that just came in, Scott. If you can you see the chat from where you are now?
Yeah. Give me just a second to read here.
All right.
All right. The second one, that'll be a Phil question.
Oh, the forages for free. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Virginia, we can test the forages for free. There's an account that we can go through, so you can just get with your county agent. Assuming you're in Virginia, there is no cost to you for that. At least I've been sending them and not paying for them, so I'm assuming they're for free.
Well, I'd say keep sending them until somebody tells you different.
Well, Scott, I'll get up with you to get your forage tester. Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you.
It's me, Dwayne, by the way.
Hey there, Dwayne. Good to see you. I could just see part of you. I thought that looks like somebody I should know. I can see you now.
All right. Well, thanks everybody again. And if you have forage questions, you can send them to me or Jeremy, and we can forward them on to Scott. But thanks to everybody for joining in. And if you haven't done hay testing before, I hope you'll consider it from this point forward. Again, when it's free, or at least not getting paid for, then definitely you've got a good advantage there. All right. All right, we're gonna turn everybody loose. Thank you all again, and hope everybody has a good night.